On November 25th, Michael Saylor announced that MicroStrategy purchased $5.4 billion worth of Bitcoin over the weekend, which brought its treasury to over 386,000 Bitcoin. So obviously, people are confused as to why Bitcoin's price is crashing to levels that we haven't seen since a week ago. Who's actually selling Bitcoin right now? There's some data out there that suggests that long-term hodlers are the ones actually selling. But is it really? Even people like Andrew Tate are stacking Bitcoin like Michael Saylor right now. We dive into the data to show you who's selling, who's not, and why dips only exist so that weaker hands can sell their Bitcoin to stronger hands. We already have the blueprint for how this Bitcoin adoption thing is going to play out. Don't overthink it. This is Dante with Bitcoin Simply. Let's get into it.
Every time Bitcoin dips, I'm going to be the buyer. Right?
Trust me, I know why you're doing the lending.
It's all coming. You're figuring it out.
Listen, you don't have to explain that one around here.
So I got the 50% Bitcoin. I got the Bitcoin lending. But basically, what you're going to see is Cantor Fitzgerald is going to be the sponsor of Bitcoin into traditional finance. Mm-hmm. And so we will be the leader of it. And I'll pull out this podcast in years to come and say, see, I told you, because no one's going to remember.
Who's selling their Bitcoin right now? It's not Howard Lutnick. Is it companies? Well, it's definitely not Similar Scientific, whose CEO announced that they purchased 297 Bitcoin worth $29 million on November 25th. This brings their Bitcoin treasury to 1,570 Bitcoin, worth almost $150 million. And their stock is up over 100% since announcing their Bitcoin strategy in May earlier this year. It's not Rumble, who announced that they're actually going to be buying Bitcoin with a Bitcoin treasury strategy that their CEO announced yesterday. Their stock is up 12% on the news of this strategy. And it's definitely not a small 25-year-old Japanese company named Metaplanet, whose stock is up 1,361% this year after announcing their Bitcoin strategy, which is double the amount of any other company on the Japanese stock market. According to Fred Thiel from Marathon, it's not them either. And there's another influx of corporate buyers and institutions looking to buy Bitcoin from anyone who's willing to sell it.
I think what we're going to see is institutions just waiting to buy up Bitcoin. You look at MicroStrategy, they're $3 billion bond. They're out there buying Bitcoin very aggressively. We raised $1 billion bond at 0% coupon the same week as Michael Saylor did, and we went out and acquired hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin. So lots of people are starting to do this now. And so anybody who's selling is selling into a market where there's ample demand. And I think that for the foreseeable future, we'll continue to see Bitcoin price move up, up and down, but generally the trend will be upwards.
So if it's not them, then who is it, Dante? Who's selling their Bitcoin right now? According to Glassnode, it's the long-term hodlers. But when you actually look at the fine print, they define a long-term hodler as someone who's held Bitcoin between 6 months and 12 months. Those aren't hodlers or long-term holders. They're traders. From that cohort who's bought Bitcoin in the last 6 to 12 months, they've sold 366,000 Bitcoin this month. The majority of this cohort bought Bitcoin at a price of around 58K per coin. And that means that they're selling the majority of their coins for about a 25K gain between when Bitcoin's price has risen from 72K to 99K a few days ago. But the volatility around 100K has already been told long ago. In an interview that Preston Pysh and Lynn Alden did with Simply Bitcoin in December of last year, they talked about how 100K is a critical point at which many people will consider selling their Bitcoin. And they were right.
Michael Saylor had a really interesting poll that he posted on Twitter today. And he said, how high will BTC need to rise before you would consider selling a small portion of your Bitcoin? And he had different prices. He had 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, and $1 million to never being the fourth category. And 29% of the people that responded to the poll said that they would sell some of their Bitcoin at 100,000. And so if you're an outsider or you're new to this and you're looking at that and you're saying, all right, so that's going to induce some variance or volatility in the price, like maybe once we get to 100,000, it may, and it might do it for the speculators there for a little bit. But what I would challenge people to really kind of think maybe at a second derivative of that is if you had the market weight those percentages with how many Bitcoin do those people hold, I would tell you that the people who are voting for 100,000 that they'll sell some of their position are people who hold minuscule position sizes.
This is an example of why dips exist only for the purpose of weaker hands transferring Bitcoin to stronger hands. I dug back into the archives and found that poll that Preston Pysh was talking about that Michael Saylor did on December 6th of 2023. If you look at the numbers, you see that 36.3% of the 130,000 people who filled out this poll said that they won't sell their Bitcoin unless it hits $1 million or never.
Their conviction in this upcoming cycle isn't just stronger or like twice as strong. It might be 100 times stronger. And that conviction is something that for people that are maybe watching from the outside, they cannot even comprehend.
People cannot understand this level of conviction. And here's the thesis in a nutshell.
What are you doing with Bitcoin right now? Are you buying or selling?
Whenever I have some spare cash, we buy more Bitcoin.
If you've come to understand that Bitcoin is the most important asset ever, then you need to protect it the right way. And that's precisely why the Bitcoin way exists. Members of their team will walk you through proper 100% self-custody, step by step, so you can remove all the counterparty risk, stop sharing keys with third parties, and ensure you protect your generational wealth the right way. Go to thebitcoinway.com and schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. Don't delay. Your wealth is at stake. Even during bull markets, we've seen pullbacks of 10%, 25%, 30%. So this is completely normal. And there may be something at a macro level that's playing in here. In a great chart from my friend Joe Consorti at Thea, he shows that Bitcoin typically lags the M2 money supply by about 70 days, which according to his chart, M2 money supply is pulling back, which means that according to this chart and analysis, we could see Bitcoin fall back to a range between 70K and 80K. And that's completely okay, because any reasonable or rational investor is going to hold Bitcoin for 4 years or more. In some other recent analysis on Twitter done by Arbin, you see that the worst performing 4-year period in Bitcoin's history is from June of 2019 through June of 2023, which Bitcoin only returned 122%. Its best 4-year period, between October 2015 and October 2019, it returned 6,566%. Any average 4-year period during Bitcoin's history has returned over 1,000%. So, whether you're reasonable or you're rational, the right thing to do is to buy and hold Bitcoin for 4 years. Or a more reasonable time frame is forever. Bitcoiners are willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time.
Great investors are open-minded and understand things before other people. So I know this might feel polarizing, but I encourage you to keep an open mind right now. I see Bitcoin as a very misunderstood asset class. It's decentralized and finite, which means no government can print more at will. In the early days, the exchanges for Bitcoin were prone to hacks and fraud, but the issue has been resolved with the recent launch of the Bitcoin ETFs backed by 2 of the world's largest asset managers, BlackRock and Fidelity. So anyone could hold these ETFs in your retirement account.
He's the only one laughing in that stadium. And since 2011, it's averaged annual returns of 150% per year, making it the best performing asset 11 out of the last 14 years. And people who finally understand that when they save in Bitcoin, life gets cheaper, like this guy, who's coming out on Twitter to confess openly that he invested $5,000 into Starbucks in 2016, which now is worth $12,500, versus investing that $5,000 into Bitcoin, which would now be worth $250,000. But let's be honest, the number go up technology of Bitcoin is great, but the freedom go up and hope go up technology of Bitcoin is why we're actually here.
Long-term, Michael Saylor's out there saying, hey, 13 million is your target for Bitcoin. How do folks navigate the two?
Well, that's his base case, Charles. His bull case is 49 million in today's dollars. And for those who think that's outlandish, I mean, well, what is the total addressable market for perfect money or perfect capital? And what percentage do you think that Bitcoin could actually capture of global assets? I mean, I would say that 200 trillion is actually very reasonable over the coming decades. But honestly, I mean, people talk about price. Charles, the money is great, but the mission is even greater. I don't know anyone who bought shares of Apple or Nvidia or even some beautiful beachfront property and said, wow, I feel like I have a sense of purpose now. But I know thousands of people who feel that way after buying just a small amount of Bitcoin. They feel empowered. They want to help others. They want to give back, and they feel a sense of purpose. And I tweeted about this today, so shout out to Max Kaiser. But that's what this is about. It's about something bigger than ourselves. Hope is the most powerful motivating force, and Bitcoin brings out the hope. It brings out the best in us. So yeah, the money's great, but this is about building a better future for every generation, and that's worth more than any price target.
One of the best ways to grow in your confidence and to experience the hope that the Bitcoin community has in real life is to go to a conference. Here's a quick story. Back in 2022, when Swan announced their first Pacific Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin's price was crashing down to 17K in the midst of the FTX collapse. There were 1,000 people there who were as optimistic and hopeful as any group of people I've ever been around in my life. You wouldn't know that Bitcoin's price was crashing because that's not the only thing that Bitcoiners care about. And I know that you'll experience this feeling in person, in real life, by joining me and hundreds of other Bitcoiners down in Dallas, Texas, from April 3rd through April 6th at the BitBlockBoom conference. You'll get to hear great content from some of your favorite speakers and people in Bitcoin, like Guy Swan, Parker Lewis, Bob Burnett, Marty Bent, and me. You'll get access to workshops where you can do deep dives on buying your first Bitcoin or taking the next step in learning how to start mining Bitcoin on your own. Your ticket will also get you access to exclusive events like Casino Night on Saturday. Use the promo code BBB21 for $100 off your ticket. That's BBB21 for $100 off your ticket. If you enjoy these videos and get value out of them, subscribe to the channel where we drop content like this 6 days a week. Or simply share this video with a family member, a friend, or a loved one as we come up on Thanksgiving, where you know they're going to grill you about Bitcoin's price crashing from 99K to 92K, levels we haven't seen in a week. You can gently remind them lovingly that Bitcoin's still up over 100% year to date. If you don't hear from me before Thanksgiving, I hope that you have a happy one. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.